West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy with Chef Justice Putnam. Netrootsradio.com.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma fleur sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte.
Well, the breaking news of the night is that Special Prosecutor Jack Smith has invoked the crime fraud exception in a motion to force one of Donald Trump's lawyers to testify to a grand jury without being able to refuse to answer questions because of the attorney-client privilege. The crime fraud exception can overrule the attorney-client privilege. The New York Times is reporting tonight federal prosecutors overseeing the investigation into former President Donald J. Trump's handling of classified documents are seeking to pierce assertions of attorney-client privilege and compel one of his lawyers to answer more questions before a grand jury, according to two people familiar with the matter, adding an aggressive new dimension to the inquiry and underscoring the legal peril facing Mr. Trump. The prosecutors have sought approval from a federal judge to invoke what is known as the crime fraud exception, which allows them to work around attorney-client privilege when they have reason to believe that legal advice or legal services have been used in furthering a crime. The fact that prosecutors invoked the exception in a sealed motion to compel the testimony of the lawyer Evan Corcoran suggests that they believe Mr. Trump or his allies might have used Mr. Corcoran's services in that way. Evan Corcoran is the lawyer who met with federal investigators last June and handed over more than 30 government documents in response to a Justice Department subpoena served on Donald Trump. At that time, another Trump lawyer, Christina Bobb, signed a statement swearing that they had conducted what they called a diligent search. That was their phrase, a diligent search for all government documents in Donald Trump's possession at his Florida home. That statement was written by Evan Corcoran, and that statement proved to be false. 6 weeks later, the FBI executed a search warrant at the same property where the Trump lawyers swore in writing there were no more documents, and the FBI found more than 100 additional classified documents and several hundred additional government documents that were illegally in Donald Trump's possession. The search warrant used by the FBI that day said there was, quote, probable cause to believe that evidence of obstruction of justice would be found. The New York Times reports tonight it was also not immediately clear whether the Justice Department suspects misconduct by Mr. Corcoran and Mr. Trump, by Mr. Trump and others, or by Mr. Trump alone. So the big news of the night is that Jack Smith is telling a federal judge that he so strongly suspects that Donald Trump's lawyer was somehow involved in criminal conduct, that that lawyer should be compelled to testify under oath in a grand jury without the protection of attorney-client privilege. Another witness Jack Smith has subpoenaed for grand jury testimony has announced He will refuse to testify. Mike Pence, the first former vice president in history to be subpoenaed in a criminal investigation to give under oath testimony to a grand jury about the president he served, announced today that he will make the single most preposterous legal claim ever made by a vice president of the United States. Multiple media outlets are reporting tonight that Mike Pence will cite the Constitution's speech and debate clause as a reason that he will not have to answer any questions under oath to a grand jury. You will hear from the country's reigning scholarly authority on matters of constitutional law, Harvard Law professor Lawrence Tribe, about this in just a moment. But as the only person you will hear from tonight who used to work in the United States Senate, I'm going to take what they call in the Senate a point of personal privilege to offer you the very clear reason that I see why the speech and debate clause cannot possibly apply to the Vice President of the United States. Here is the speech and debate clause in its entirety. The senators and representatives shall receive a compensation for their services to be ascertained by law and paid out of the Treasury of the United States. They shall, in all cases except treason, felony, and breach of the peace, be privileged from arrest during their attendance at the session of their respective houses, and in going to and returning from the same, and for any speech or debate in either house, they shall not be questioned in any other place. For the moment, my analysis will rest on the first word of the clause, the senators. The clause applies to, as the first words indicate, the senators and representatives. The Vice President of the United States, by no definition, is a United States Senator. The Vice President of the United States, unlike every member of the United States Senate, does not have the power to introduce legislation in the Senate. The Vice President of the United States is not allowed to vote on over 99% of the votes held in the United States Senate. The fact that the Vice President of the United States is only allowed to vote to break a tie in the Senate does not make the Vice President a senator. It makes the Vice President something more like a judge in a courtroom who comes down on one side or the other of arguments made by the lawyers in the courtroom who are in no way the equal of the judge in the courtroom, nor is the judge the equal of the lawyers in the courtroom. The Vice President of the United States is not allowed to vote on impeachments in the United States Senate. The Vice President of the United States is not allowed to vote on treaties in the United States Senate, which can never be stuck in a tie vote because they require 2/3 majority to pass. The Vice President of the United States is not allowed to vote in what has become the single most common vote in the United States Senate, cloture votes, which require 60 votes. The Vice President of the United States is not allowed to be a member of a Senate committee. When the Senate Majority Leader appoints Senate conferees to conference committees with the House of Representatives to work out the final language of legislation, the Vice President cannot be one of those conferees because the Vice President is not a senator. I could go on and on about the powers, rights, and privileges that belong to each United States senator, none of which belong to the Vice President. And conversely, no senator has a single power or right that the Vice President has. Not one. Every member of the United States Senate is sworn in with an oath of office on the Senate floor. The Vice President is sworn in on the Capitol steps with the President on Inauguration Day. Only in a universe poisoned by Donald Trump could any adults be involved in a conversation in the 21st century about the difference between a United States Senator and the Vice President of the United States. The poisoning of Mike Pence by Donald Trump has offered Mike Pence countless humiliations, and so Mike Pence, who left his capacity for embarrassment somewhere in 2015, will now take on the embarrassment of being the only Vice President in history who does not know that he was never a United States Senator.
It is Wednesday, the 15th of February of 2023, and you are in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. I am your chef de cuisine, Justice Putnam. Gunner, the English Bulldog, is our snoozing sous chef, and our daily special is Smothered Benedict Wednesdays. Of course, it's a lovely egg dish with a velvety hollandaise sauce, but we really want to know who will rid us of those meddlesome priests, all of them. It's plural here. In the original movie, Beckett, just as an aside, it was a meddlesome priest who happened to be a bishop. And here in today's new Agogo society, it is meddlesome priests, plural. We have so many of them, and will no one rid us of them? Please do. God. All right, well, how are you? It's Wednesday. And we're in the middle of the week, if you follow that kind of linear existence on the calendar, because it is. We're in the middle of the week. And it feels good to be here, even though tragedy is abounds. But I suppose, in the Buddhist sense, life is suffering. And I don't know. Maybe we need some quiet every now and then, and we do. We do need it. Anyway, yeah, I got college-age grandkids. Isn't that nice? Well, one college-age grandkid who's actually almost out of college. He's getting into law school here. And a granddaughter who is almost out of high school. Another granddaughter getting into high school. And I don't know. If there's ever a shootout, I hope they're around so they can tell me what to do. They're all trained. They know what to do. So, block all exits. Shelter in place. Fight if necessary. All we had to do as kids is dive under desks and wait for, I don't know, nuclear annihilation. And I don't know. I just figured it's kind of fun diving under a desk. And then we would go out and during recess and pretend we were like jets. We always like to do that. Run around the schoolyard with our arms out like wings. All that kind of stuff. And the more creative of us, and I won't tell you who that might be, said, well, why don't we have U.S. jets and Russian jets? I mean, it was the meme of the day. We were, Russia was, Soviet Union, but Russia was easier for a little kid to say, so we did. Yeah. So I remember actually having a tug of war where it was against the Republicans and the Democrats. I came up with that. We were only in second grade. What do they know? But I did. So it's been a struggle. You think there's been partisanship only recently? No, it's been ongoing. There's a contingent among us, for some reason, have no idea that civility and graciousness are actual admirable qualities rather than signs of weakness. Oh, you're a nice person, you must be weak. God, I hate that. Well, on the other hand, maybe it's the bad part of me that is weak, and that is exactly what is the case. The idea of growth, evolution, I don't know, I do know. It's supposed to be a part of life. I mean, growing up, right? You don't have to be old stodgy about it. None of us are. Well, maybe a few of us who decided that Rihanna's dance number was a little too over-sexualized for the kids. Yeah, well, I'm telling everybody, this is what I saw. All those fluffy white costumed dance troupe members there. That was sperm. She was an ovum. It was about pregnancy. She announced her pregnancy. People should be happy. I thought it was cute. Had a little baby bump there, too. Pretty quick after the last one, I got to tell you, in the scheme of things. But hey, so people are still like they're getting out of social media because it was drawn to their attention that maybe, you know, when a black woman does this, it's always over sexualized, isn't it? I don't know. Or maybe these particular people just didn't want to have to explain sperm and ovum and all that other stuff. You know, I would have just said, oh, those are like, spy balloons, and she's the red moon. Casting her red moonlight upon the landscape of our minds. And then give the kids a lollipop and tell them, pretty soon you got to have a nap. Oh, no, we got to, get rid of books because the kids won't take a nap. Okay. Maybe I lived in a bubble. Maybe all of us here lived in a bubble. I grew up in an America that the idea of burning books was, kind of wrong. That famous photograph of the DJ down in Texas burning Beatles albums, hearkened to the pyres of Nazi Germany. Very reminiscent of it. And a lot of people thought that was weird. We're going to burn these albums because it's satanic. Gotta hold your hand is satanic. Give me a break. All right. People wonder how we could burn witches. Well, we actually hung them. We didn't really burn them, but we hung them. Sometimes threw them in the lake with a stone around their neck, tied around their neck. And apparently if they floated, that meant they were witches. Okay. So Monty Python was right. Wondered where they got it. Got it from overseas. Well, actually for them, it was probably a domestic concern. And then they brought it overseas to here. When I would travel in Mexico back in the day, I was warned, not in any, xenophobic way by any means, but I was advised that maybe you don't want to be going into a village at dusk. And I asked why. He says, well, that's when the evil spirits come, and I laughed. Superstition is a very powerful thing. And it does exist. And when I heard that, I thought, well, maybe part of not being an ugly American means I should probably take heed. Maybe I should honor that. When in Rome, I guess. So I was made very well aware. And I saw that it was, there's a lot of superstition out there in the world. And one of the nice things about having representative democracy is that we were encouraged to put our superstitions aside so that we can fill the potholes out in the street. Now we can't even fill the potholes out in the street without somebody yelling at us like, oh, you're doing it too quick, you're doing it too slow, you're a socialist commie pedophile. Wow. I guess we're going to take some time to get those potholes filled now, aren't we? I don't know. Maybe they've been coddled enough. They're acting like children, and maybe they should be treated as such. I'm serious. They whine. Oh, you're taking my propaganda outlets away. It's censorship. Hey, we've all had to live by the magic of the market. ON and maybe it was Newsmax, but I actually believe both of them wanted more money. And they made a business decision, the cable company. What was it, DirecTV? No, we're not going to pay that licensing fee. We're not renegotiating a contract before it's done. And even if they're renegotiating a new contract, there's nothing that says that they're bound to have to stay with that under a new contract. That's why new contracts are written, lady. I'm looking at you, Green and Burbert. And others, too. Now it's all woke, liberal, big tech, and big business. Nazis always co-opt. Nazis always project. We should not be afraid to recognize that what these Nazis are doing is the Nazi thing. Oh, you're being too divisive by calling them Nazis. Well, I don't know. I could call them fascists, but Nazi rolls off the tongue better for me. And I will argue that the wedding of the Burgermeisters, the industrial class, the oligarchs, actually goes more towards the Nazi side, even though fascism has that incorporated as part of its MO. I think the Nazis codified it a little bit more. So I'm okay. Anyway, enough of that. You've heard it all before. Why do I go on so every morning? Well, I am pissed. And I got to tell you, people like this, I don't know. I hate calling DeSantis a gnome because gnomes have endearing qualities. But this guy definitely has a Napoleon complex. I'm really, all right? Because he is just a wee fellow. Doesn't seem like it. TV always, packs on a few pounds and makes you look taller. But he is, after all, a wee fellow, and not all wee fellows have Napoleon complexes. They can live within their skin without inflating themselves into something that they're not. Which is the lesson for all of us, right? Whether we be wee fellows or not so wee fellows. But this guy DeSantis wants to export his Florida fascism as if it's some kind of new brand. No, it's the same old brand that we are all quite familiar with, Ron. I heard that actually Huey Long, people actually liked him. DeSantis doesn't really exude the kind of charisma to be able to pull off this populist whatever it is. See, they have a farm club where they keep churning these types out. There's researchers, there's dirty trick people, and dirty tricks is just for when the kids are around because they're rat fuckers. That's what Roger Stone called himself and his group, Segretti and the rest. Yeah, from Nixon, Manafort, Atwater, they were all rat fuckers. But for, TV at dinner time with the kids sitting around, you couldn't say that. So the idea of dirty tricks, tricky dick, dirty tricksters, you have those. They recruit them. Yeah, you'd make a great stormtrooper. You would make a great person in front of a camera. You would make a great person slotted in as a representative, even though we have no idea what your real name is, DeVolder Sandos. I'm serious. These people just don't pop up out of nowhere. They are groomed, recruited, and then groomed for the positions that they are most capable of succeeding at. And I will argue that we are not as, shall we say, practiced at that. Oh yeah, we have little pockets of it. But we certainly don't have the big-time bucks that they do. I would like to see this Soros money spread out a little bit more. But no. Apparently, freedom, liberty, equality, due process for all is not a moneymaker. But wresting autonomy from a whole gender of people by the way. Just wrest all rights away from them. Oh, yeah, well, you can't do what your doctor says that you and the doctor say you should do. Right. Superstition is a powerful behavior pattern. What do we have in store for you here in the Bistro Cafe? Because we have really gone on and on and on. But anyway, Lawrence at the top with Special Counsel Jack Smith. Criminal conduct by Trump's lawyer. You can't hide behind privilege when you're committing the furtherance of a crime. And they got the evidence, apparently. Yeah, old Trump's whining that his phones are all tapped. Well, if they are, you ought to be afraid because it takes a judge to get your phone tapped. And to get a judge to sign off on it, there has to be actual evidence of a crime. Donnie. Anyway, on the rest of the menu, Joe Biden's judicial picks are more diverse by race and gender than those of any of his predecessors. Fox News lost an attempt to shut down a multi-billion-dollar defamation lawsuit against the network. That's the Smart Tech lawsuit. And New Jersey Governor Phil Murphy, we're looking at you, Ronnie DeSantis, is expanding the Advanced Placement African American Studies courses next year from one school to 26. After the break, we move to the chef's table where the head of China's National Soccer Federation has been arrested on corruption charges. And India's tax officials searched BBC offices in New Delhi and Mumbai weeks after the broadcaster aired a documentary critical of Prime Minister Modi in the UK. All that and more on West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit. At netrootsradio.com. To the right of the page is the chat room link, and the chat room is monitored by Kelly Lincoln, and we thank Kelly for doing so. Across the page, near the bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com, across to the left from the chat room link is the link to our Patreon page. And if you could become a recurring Patreon of Netroots Radio, it really does help. And if you could afford to send us what you might spend on, well, how about an espresso-type coffee drink? It's not a Ferrari. It's just an espresso-type coffee drink. If you could send those funds to us once a month, I cannot tell you how much that helps us pay these bills, in some ways, enormous costs to keep this powerhouse of resistance resisting as the founders originally intended so many years ago. And we thank you for your generosity for allowing us to fulfill that civic duty. And we also thank those of you who may consider doing so in the future. If you would like to follow Netroots Radio on Twitter, Mastodon, Spoutable, you can do so at Netroots Radio. Tom takes care of those. Thank you, Tom. Follow me on the same at Justice Putnam. I post the show notes and links diary 10 minutes before showtime on Daily Co's. And that gets put up on Twitter and then Mastodon and Spoutable as quickly as I can. But as you know, you can find the actual reportage by going to those mentioned links in the show notes and links diary. If you would like to follow the show on Twitter, you can do so at Cookbook West. I don't have it hooked up on Mastodon or Spoutable, but I will. And do please pick up podcasts by way of Spreaker, Stitcher, TuneIn, iHeart, YouTube, iTunes, and wherever podcasts can be found. They are everywhere. They are. Okay, this first offering in the Bistro Cafe part of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, because we still have the chef's table after the break. This first offering is by the great Oliver Willis out of the American Independent. By a vote of 54 to 45, the Senate yesterday, Tuesday, confirmed Gina Mendez-Miro to the U.S. District Court for the District of Puerto Rico. With that vote, 100 of President Joe Biden's judicial nominees have been approved, outpacing the number of Donald Trump's nominees to the bench that had been confirmed at a similar point in his presidency. Biden's picks are more diverse by race and gender than any of his predecessors, and 2 years into his presidency, Trump had 85 judges confirmed. He did not reach the century mark in judicial confirmations until his third year in office in May of 2019. Trump installed ideologically conservative federal judges whose rulings have limited the government's ability to impose health regulations, expand voting rights, and protect LGBTQ rights. Most notably, Amy Coney Barrett, Brett Kavanaugh, and Neil Gorsuch, the three Supreme Court justices nominated by Trump, were all members of the conservative majority that voted 3-2 to overturn Roe v. Wade. And the other justices voting against abortion rights, Alito, Roberts, Thomas, were all nominated by George W. Bush and H.W. Bush. The three dissenting judges, Breyer, Sotomayor, and Kagan, were nominated by Clinton and Barack Obama. The overwhelming majority of Trump judicial nominees confirmed by the Senate were white and male. Biden's nominees have included Judge Ketanji Brown Jackson, whose nomination to the U.S. Supreme Court fulfilled a Biden campaign promise to nominate the first black woman to the court. Jackson was confirmed over the opposition of 47 Republican senators on April 7th of 2022. Mendez-Miro is a member of the Hispanic National Bar Association and the International Association of LGBTQ+ judges, and will be the first openly LGBTQ person to sit on the court in Puerto Rico. The Senate on Monday also voted to confirm Cindy Chung to the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Third Circuit, making her the first Asian American to sit on the court located in Philadelphia. Jennifer Peltz of the Associated Press brings us this next offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, Smothered Benedict Wednesdays. Fox News lost an attempt to shut down a multi-billion-dollar defamation lawsuit that accuses the network of spreading lies that a voting technology company helped steal the 2020 election from then U.S. President Donald Trump. New York Supreme Court Appellate Division, a mid-level appeals court, ruled against the network, which wanted judges to dismiss the $2.7 billion defamation case. The company that brought the case, Smartmatic, has said it played a valid and small role in the election. It hailed the ruling as a step toward holding Fox News accountable for amplifying unsupported and damaging claims from Trump's lawyers. Fox News cast the case as an attempt to chill journalism, expressing confidence the network ultimately would prevail. Tuesday's decision means Smartmatic's suit continues against Fox News host Maria Bartiromo and Janine Pirro, former host Lou Dobbs, and Trump attorney Rudy Giuliani. A claim against Trump lawyer Sidney Powell was dismissed earlier because she does not have ties to New York, where the case was filed. The 5-judge ruling concluded there were significant allegations that Giuliani and Powell defamed the company. The complaint alleges in detailed fashion that in their coverage of commentary, Fox News, Dobbs, and Bartiromo effectively endorsed and participated in statements with reckless disregard for or serious doubts about whether there was any reliable evidence for them, the 5 judges wrote in a unanimous opinion. Citing the same reasoning, they also reinstated Smartmatic's claims against Pirro, which a lower court had thrown out. Federal and state election officials, exhaustive reviews in battleground states, and Trump's own attorney general found no widespread fraud that could have changed the outcome of the 2020 election, nor did they uncover any credible evidence that the vote was tainted. Trump's allegations of fraud also were roundly rejected by dozens of courts, including by judges whom he had appointed. The ruling comes as Fox News fights a separate $1.6 billion defamation lawsuit from Denver-based Dominion Voting Systems with a trial date in April. The network also is fighting lawsuits from a Venezuelan businessman who said he was wrongly accused of trying to corrupt the election. Florida-based Smartmatic said that in the 2020 presidential election, its technology and software were used only in California's Los Angeles County. The Democratic bastion went as expected for Democratic nominee and now President Joe Biden. But Smartmatic says Fox News and the 3 hosts repeatedly allowed Trump's lawyers to falsely portray Smartmatic as a foreign company involved in a sprawling multi-state operation to flip votes to Biden from the Republican incumbent. Brings us this final offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Democratic Governor Phil Murphy said Tuesday that his administration is expanding advanced placement African American studies courses next year from 1 school to 26 in New Jersey after Republican Governor Ron DeSantis blocked the course from being taught in public schools in Florida. Murphy's move comes about a month after the administration of DeSantis, a potential presidential candidate, declared without citing any evidence that the course violates state law and is not historically accurate. Murphy cited Florida as he unveiled the course expansion yesterday during a visit to a Newark high school alongside state education officials and Newark Mayor Ras Baraka, saying DeSantis is prioritizing political culture wars over academics. New Jersey will proudly teach our kids that black history is American history, Murphy said in a statement, while the DeSantis administration stated that AP African American Studies significantly lacks educational value. New Jersey will stand on the side of teaching our full history. A message seeking comment was left with DeSantis' spokespeople. The courses have begun in 60 schools nationwide as part of a 2-year pilot phase and are set to expand to hundreds next year. Florida's move stirred a debate over the courses. DeSantis said the course seeks to push an agenda and violates the Stop Woke Act he signed last year, which prohibits instructions that defines people as necessarily oppressed or privileged based upon their race. Critics say DeSantis is sending a message that black history doesn't count in Florida. The College Board, which administers the AP program, released course curriculum details this month, which show that topics including Black Lives Matter, slavery, reparations, and queer life are not part of the course's exam, but are still included as potential research topics, along with black conservatism. The board said course revisions were mostly complete before DeSantis objected. New York School Superintendent Roger Leon embraced the expansion. 6 schools in his district will teach the course in the 2023-24 school year. New Jersey's statewide learning standards already require some diversity education and lessons, requirements that were expanded in 2021 under a state law requiring districts to incorporate instruction on diversity and inclusion. Murphy also targeted DeSantis during his January State of the State address, criticizing his comments that Florida is where woke goes to die. As for Murphy's own presidential ambitions, he said he will back President Joe Biden if he runs for re-election, leaving open the possibility he could consider running. If not, we all are. All right. That brings us to our break, and when we get back from that break, we will go through weather from around the world, and we will finish up with the stories that we've curated for you today. You are listening to West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, and we will be right back.
You are listening to netrootsradio.com.
Please hang up and try again.
From a point at sea to the circles of your mind, a new force is at work for planetary transformation. New radio for a new Earth.
This is Take Two Movie Review. I'm Clinton Johnston. This week, Twistin' the Night Away. Director-writer M. Night Shyamalan has had a career of twists and turns both in general and for me personally. His first 2 big films, The Sixth Sense and Unbreakable, were notable for having surprising twists at their ends. Well, not so much twists as big reveals. But then Shyamalan made his smartest twist. He stopped writing reveals. Because seriously, who can keep that up? Especially with people now intently looking for the twist. Turns out what people like less than a weak twist is you not doing one at all, and I guess cheating them of the chance to figure you out and feel superior, whatever. People were upset. There was so much knee-jerk anti-Shyamalan fervor, I was surprised he kept getting greenlit. Meanwhile, I still loved his films. But then came another twist. Having made thrillers like a scion of Hitchcock and De Palma, Shyamalan nudged his work over into horror, and I don't like horror. I just don't. So I lost one of my favorite filmmakers. So, now here's Knock at the Cabin, my first Shyamalan film in years, and it has so many of the qualities that I loved in his earlier works. It's nicely written, it's solidly paced, he crafts scenes of emotional intimacy extremely well, along with capturing really great earnest performances from his actors, a killer 1-2 punch of skills. And yet, the movie uses a lot of the structure and filmic language of horror. I mean, for all that Knock at the Cabin examines the thin line between empathy and self-sacrifice, a line I didn't know existed, it remains, at its core, a home invasion thriller in what I call the ritual killing genre. We meet some people, get to know them, and then watch them die. Slasher films, torture porn, disaster movies, why do we make films like these? Why do we watch them? If you like them, great. Go see Knock at the Cabin. Dave Bautista's casting is inspired. I'll be rewatching Lady in the Water. And yes, I know you hated that one. This has been Take Two Movie Review. I'm Clinton Johnston. Catch up with us at TakeTwoMovieReview.com and feed us back on our channel on YouTube.
I was in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean when it happened. There was a sudden jolt and our submarine crashed on the seafloor. We were in total darkness.
That's Dr. Dejana Figueroa, a marine biologist and STEM teacher, talking about a deep sea dive she'll never forget.
It's funny, when I was a kid, I was afraid of the ocean. And there I was, 2 miles below the surface. But as a scientist, you prepare for that. Using our training and a little creativity, we fixed the sub and finished our experiments. The dive was just too important. Every dive gives us glimpses at things few people ever get to see. Glowing creatures, fiery undersea volcanoes. When we got back to the surface, I kissed the ground and called my mom, of course. But you know what? I wouldn't trade that dive for anything.
Dr. Figueroa uses her passion for STEM to discover new things and make the world a better place. She can STEM, so can you. Check out She Can STEM for more stories and inspiration. A message from the Ad Council.
Hi, I'm Tom Hartman, and since you're listening to netrootsradio.com, show your progressive side and go to the donate button on the bottom of the homepage. It's progressives like you who power Netroots Radio and keep the progressive message beaming everywhere 24 hours a day. Just go to our donate button at the bottom of netrootsradio.com. Thank you for keeping progressive radio at full power.
When you learned about the killing of Tyre Nichols, were you appalled? And I have a follow-up question.
I'm Lily Ledbetter, and this is a Civil Liberties Minute with ACLU attorney Bill Newman.
And the follow-up question is, were you surprised? Tyre Nichols died at the hands of members of the Scorpion unit of the Memphis Police Department. Scorpion, disbanded by the Memphis police chief after Tyre Nichols was killed, was formed in November 2021, a specialized squad of some 40 officers mandated to bring down violent crime. There now are many credible reports that Scorpion was operating on its own terms, with residents testifying to Scorpion's repeated acts of physical intimidation and harassment. Young black men were targeted. The city is 65% black, yet according to the police department's own data, 90% of the people arrested by Scorpion were black. And black residents in Memphis were 3 times more likely than whites to be subjected to physical force by the police, 3 times as likely. This data predating the creation of Scorpion. Indeed, it goes back 7 years. A Scorpion tactic: drive up to people on the street, jump out of the cruiser or unmarked car, and engage in the vehicular equivalent of stop and frisk. It is not clear how many Scorpion members operated with these tactics, but clearly some did. Which raises, yet again, the perennial question: who will police the police?
The Civil Liberties Minute is made possible by the ACLU because freedom can't protect itself.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1950. That was the day the Red Scare took its toll on the U.S. labor movement. The Congress of Industrial Organizations expelled the International Union of Mine, Mill, and Smelter Workers for their alleged communist ties. Although small in numbers, communist organizers had played an important role in building the large industrial unions that were the core of the CIO. During the CIO's 1949 convention, this anti-communist hysteria was on full display. There, the CIO delegates decided to bar any individual with communist affiliations from serving as union officers. Their panic did not stop there, as the CIO leadership also voted to revoke the charters of unions they deemed too closely aligned with the communists. Immediately, the convention threw out the United Electrical, Radio, and Machine Workers. During the 1950s, more unions were caught up in the purge, including the International Union of Longshoremen and Warehousemen. In all, the anti-communist frenzy saw 11 unions ousted from the House of Labor. According to a report to Congress by the Department of Labor, the cause of these expulsions was that the union's, quote, espousal of Soviet Russia became increasingly distasteful to the CIO leadership and rank-and-file membership. Cold War fear-mongering had effectively isolated the most left-leaning unions in the country. The impact on the labor movement was long-lasting. After the purge, unions took a much more moderate stance on things like civil rights. This hampered their organizing efforts in the South. To this day, there is less union representation in southern states. It also pushed the CIO closer to the Democratic Party and paved the way for the CIO's reunification with the more politically moderate American Federation of Labor.
Thank you for accompanying us here to the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, Smothered Benedict Wednesdays. We always begin weather from around the world along the banks of the Rogue River in the Rogue River Valley of Southern Oregon, on the west coast of the continental United States of America, where it is currently 28 degrees Fahrenheit, expecting a high in the mid to upper 40s, so a bit warmer even than what it was yesterday because we had snow. Most of that has melted off, though it is quite crusty out there at the moment. Mostly cloudy currently, though we're looking for plentiful sunshine later on. Winds light and variable. Some clouds overnight with lows in the low to mid 20s. And winds light and variable, and then cloudy tomorrow, highs in the mid to upper 40s, winds light and variable. Pollen is rated as none here in the town of Rogue River. The air quality index for the region is in the good range at 33 parts per million, and the daytime UV index is low at level 2. Barometric pressure is holding steady at 30.43 inches. Visibility is up to 9 miles, and relative humidity is at 93%. Weather from around the world is brought to you by a crowd of crowdsourced weather stations that a crowd crowdsources from around the world. London is 58 degrees and fair. Paris is 56 and sunny. Rome is 60 degrees and sunny. Kyiv is 35 and fair. Kabul is 38 and mostly cloudy. Hong Kong is 61 and partly cloudy. Tokyo is 34 and partly cloudy. Sydney, Australia is 68 degrees and partly cloudy. San Francisco, California is 48 degrees and sunny with a beach warning, meaning do not turn your back on the ocean. And New York, New York is 55 degrees Fahrenheit and sunny. And that is weather from around the world, brought to you by a crowd of crowdsourced weather stations that a crowd crowdsources from around the world. Staff at the Associated Press brings us this first amuse-bouche here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, Smothered Benedict Wednesdays. The head of China's National Soccer Federation has been arrested on corruption charges in the latest blow to the country's effort to grow its standing at home and internationally. A one-sentence statement from the ruling Communist Party's anti-graft watchdog body said Chen Shuwan had been placed under investigation by national and Hubei provincial sports bodies. No details were given about the accusations against him. Chen is head of the Chinese Football Association and vice chair of its party committee, underscoring the government's heavy hand in attempting to direct success in the game. Despite its success in the Olympics, China has only qualified for one World Cup in almost 20 years. China's president and Communist Party leader Xi Jinping declared a goal to make the country a football superpower, but funding and enthusiasm have appeared to dwindle. The national team has seen a revolving door of foreign and domestic managers, and one of its most decorated past leaders, former Everton and Sheffield United midfielder Lee T, has been jailed amid a graft investigation. China's top division clubs paid eye-watering salaries to attract foreign talent, but the league has virtually collapsed under the now abandoned zero COVID policy and a lingering economic malaise.
Je te donne ce mon amour pour la vie entière, la promesse de me trouver à tes genoux. Aussitôt que tu m'appelles, rester toujours fidèle, c'est tout, c'est tout. Je te donne tous mes printemps, mes étés de mer, mes automnes quand les feuilles tombent partout. Si ce n'est pas une bonne affaire, je te donne tous mes hivers.
Krutika Patti of the Associated Press brings us this final amuse-bouche here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. India's tax officials searched BBC offices in New Delhi and Mumbai on Tuesday, weeks after it aired a documentary critical of Prime Minister Modi in the UK, the broadcaster said. Rights groups and opposition politicians denounced the move by India's Income Tax Department as an attempt to intimidate the media. Britain's publicly funded national broadcaster said it was cooperating fully with authorities and hoped to have this situation resolved as soon as possible. Late in the evening, the BBC said officials were still at the two offices. Many staff have now left the building, but some have been asked to remain and are continuing to cooperate with the ongoing inquiries, it said, adding, "Our output and journalism continues as normal." Indian tax authorities declined to comment. The tax department was looking at documents related to the BBC's business operation and its Indian arm, the Press Trust of India news agency reported. Citing unidentified sources, of course, the Editors Guild of India denounced the move, saying it continues a trend of using government agencies to intimidate and harass press organizations that are critical of government policies or the ruling establishment. Akar Patel, author of Amnesty International's India's Board, said the raids were a blatant affront to freedom of expression. The Indian authorities are clearly trying to harass and intimidate the BBC over its critical coverage of the ruling party, Patel said. The investigation is undemocratic and reeks of desperation and shows that the Modi government is scared of criticism, tweeted K.C. Venugopal, General Secretary of the Opposition Congress Party. "We condemn these intimidation tactics in the harshest terms." Gaurav Bhatia, a spokesperson for Modi's governing Janata Party, said the BBC should have nothing to fear if it follows Indian laws. But he added that the broadcaster's history is tainted and full of hatred for India, and called it corrupt, without offering any specifics. Well, that brings us to the end of our broadcast period here in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, but only for today. But you do know, Netroots Radio broadcasts on, and we will meet up here tomorrow for Metro Shrimp and Grits Thursdays. So do stay tuned to Netroots Radio all day and all night for all the breaking news as it breaks, and we will meet up here tomorrow, right here in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appétit.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma robe à fleurs, sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, qu'il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte Goer. Je voudrais toujours te plaire dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je veux déjeuner par terre, comme au long de golfe clair, t'embrasser les yeux ouverts dans mon jardin d'hiver. Pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver.